Hebrews chapter 11, verse 23 to 31. Emulating the heroes of faith in Hebrews chapter 11, considered as it were Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. We consider today the Mosaic period, and very quickly that group that is not specifically categorized to any group and literally in summary form. So this evening, faith exemplified in the Mosaic era and faith exemplified in the subsequent generations. Faith demonstrated in what is called the era of Moses, but also faith demonstrated in the periods of time that followed. Verse 23 of Hebrews chapter 11. By faith Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents, because they saw that the child was beautiful, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. By faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and he sprinkled the blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch them. By faith the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land, but the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they had been encircled for 7 days. By faith Rahab the prostitute did not perish with those who were disobedient, because she had given a friendly welcome to the spies. And we picked up then, what more can I say? And in relation to that section, almost all the people that reflect on it is that it does look like the plan of the preacher don't always tend to accomplish their design in terms of timekeeping. And it looks like, stated truthfully or not, that is probably frustrated that he has not enough time. And so he'll just touch on other headings. You can guess what a short sermon it would have been if he had gotten into the details even of that last part. Faith exemplified in the Mosaic era. As you read through again, please be reminded that faith in this chapter is really pictured as a faith that does have evidence, that it is actually provable. That when you ask the question, you do say that Moses had faith, you do say that Abraham had faith, you do say that the Israelites had faith, that Rahab had faith, and the list goes on and on. Do you really have evidence to prove that they did? And Hebrews chapter 11 will say, yes, I do. And this is what I'm providing you with. So that what again should be observed is that Hebrews chapter 11 really is of the same tone as the book of James. You say you have faith. Well, let's prove it. In that sense, let's see your works justify your faith, not in terms of salvation, but verify your faith. And that the faith in Hebrews 11 is active. It's not passive. He does not have his hands folded, it's rather stretching them. And as we shall see in one incident, literally the stretching of hands is what is demonstrated. So the call of Hebrews chapter 11 is firstly that if we do say we have faith, can we really prove it? Can we really show in the now that we do have faith? If you did not need to stand up and present your statement of faith and give a verbal testimony, and we were to write history in relation to you, which is what the author of Hebrews is doing. He simply compiled a historical list and is proving his case. He's proving his case because the Hebrews are at this time, because of the situation they were going through, the danger that confronted them was to let go, as it were, this trust in God. And he's saying to them, do not. And the reason you shouldn't, because this is how our forefathers also lived. Their situation was not drastically different from yours, but they remained faithful. So you do also, when your turn comes and history is being written, leave as it were a legacy, that it will be said of you that you did live a life by faith, and there is traceable proof. That's the first injunction that is calling us to respond and live like. Secondly, well, part of the reason I am telling you this story, the author said, is that you have a pattern. You have men and women you can look to and say, when they went through this situation, this is how they lived. This is how they overcame. These are the steps they took. And so in the language of the Apostle Paul, the temptations, the trials, the challenges of life that have come upon you are not new. Others have walked this path. And for each and everyone who has walked this path, when these challenges have come up, God has always provided a way out. So learn from them and seize God's means of living a life triumphant, even in relation to a race marked out for you. Earlier, the language he uses is this: we do have a cloud of witnesses. We have that group of people that are able to testify. You're saying that life is hard, and as you read that latter part, and if you read it seriously, it draws tears in your hands. The verse 32 part. Let me invite you, and I would like, as we read that part, we'll do a summary of it. Ask this question: have you been in a situation like theirs? Are you sure yours is worse than these people? 32. What more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets. Verse 33, who through faith conquered kingdoms, enforced justice, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, were made strong, out of weakness became mighty in war, put foreign armies to flight. Women received back their dead by resurrection. Well, up to that point, it sounds okay. These were miraculous experiences of life. Well, then there is that part that follows. Some were tortured, refusing to accept release so that they might rise again to a better life. Others suffered mocking and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, and implication to death. They were sown in two. They bring you, and it's in an auditorium, and it's entertainment. And this is not a machine or a soul you see electrically empowered or powered. No, fast, you are done. No, this was human. They put it on your head. 1, 2. You've been there. And we have the boldness to say, it's enough. They were stoned, 37. They were sown in two. They were killed with the sword. They went about in skins of sheep and goats. And the picture of these skins and goats, part of the story is that they were made to wear sheep skins or goat skins, and sometimes they would release the lions or the bears, and you are the sheep. And they applaud as you get torn in pieces. Destitute, afflicted, mistreated, of whom the world was not worthy, wandering about in deserts and mountains and in dens and caves of the earth. That was their home. What is it that is true about these? They all lived life by faith to their very end, irrespective of how they were treated and how they died. Well, faith exemplified in the Mosaic era. One of the features in this section that is demonstrated, or is the demonstration of living by faith in the face of hostilities and persecution, in the face of suffering. You have, in a sense, from Abraham, it's a faith of testing. And as you go on to Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, they did go through suffering, but the selection of the material is to show you that they trusted God for the future in what we might call positive light. And as we come to this part of Hebrews 11, it is the negative aspect that is being emphasized. And the point of Hebrews 11 is this, that faith does respond appropriately when things are going well. When the Lord is blessing, when the Lord is healing, when the Lord is providing, when the Lord is overwhelmingly doing glorious, miraculous things among us, we still respond and live by faith. Well, even when that is not happening, when you pray and God says, I have heard you, but my answer is simply this, you will be sown in two. You do not say to him, therefore, I have cancelled win. I have fitted because you are not good. You've prayed for your boss to be changed or be removed. And God says, no, I think you need to endure him or her. You do not, unless God is saying resign, immediately say, no, if the situation is not changing, I am out of here. Well, that's the latter part. Even when things are hard. And like I stated, I'm not sure whether it's yesterday or the other day, that we tend to give up on both ends of the pendulum. Before we have a job, before we have a car, before we have a house of our own, we are faithful. We are very prayerful. We are committed. We love the Lord. We hum the choruses. We get a job. We get promoted. Our salary increases. We have 4 cars. We have 20 houses. We have gone into real estate, or our family is doing very well. Business is prospering. All of a sudden, God is not essential. is not needed. But when life is average and there are struggles and joys, well, we probably still are faithful. When life gets to the extreme, sometimes it does. When your family mocks you because of your status, will you still remain faithful? When you are working, they called you as the first person when there's a funeral because they knew the coffin will come. When you have no job, you've moved to the village, you live in an average house, they begin to call you names. Will you still remain faithful? That's what Hebrews 11 is calling us to do. Well, the first example we have in Hebrews 11 from the Mosaic era is a couple, Amram and Jochebed, Moses' parents and Aaron's parents. We are told in verse 23, by faith Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw that the child was beautiful and they were not afraid of the king's edict. What the whole book of Hebrews is assuming, and chapter 11 is assuming, is that you know the Old Testament story. So all he's doing is a summary, and that edict assumes you know the context in which they lived, you know. Well, demonstrated by saving Moses, Amram and Jochebed demonstrated their faith by saving Moses' life by hiding Moses for 3 months in the Nile River. I'm not sure how many crocodiles it had then, but it will be right to say in a river that has crocodile as their domain and other water creatures. That's the place. The very river that others were a source of death, it is the place they will stake their child and hide him for 3 months. And the whole reason is that they understood how they did that. We're not sure, but the text tells us that it's because, one, they saw, they understood, they saw, and it's the language again of Hebrews 1. Faith is assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. In this context, we are told in emphasizing that perception because they saw that the child was beautiful. Now, in primary school, I'm not sure, I think it's probably true today. They tell us, you don't say men are beautiful. You say men are what? Are handsome. So we're not sure with the English people here. But we are told it was beautiful. They took this step of faith, and by faith, because they understood that Moses was no ordinary child. He was not just any other child. They perceived how they did. We know it's by faith, but in what detail we do not. But they knew this child is different. And we will take a step by faith to preserve his life. We are told in Acts that this beauty was actually beauty in the eyes of God. Acts chapter 7:20. At this time Moses was born, and he was beautiful in God's sight. That's Luke's story. It's not just the parents, but this is a beauty in terms of God's view and judgment, and that has to do with his purposes in the life of this being. The author emphasizes their power of perception, indicating that they saw For those of you that are Greek scholars, eidon, the greatness of the child. So it's not simply seeing, but it's a seeing with understanding in terms of what the purposes of God are for this child. The implication is that the parents understood that God had a special purpose for the child. They did this at the risk of their own lives, ignoring the king's edict. If discovered, they would have been executed. They were actually risking their lives to protect a special child. They were doing this by faith. Did Moses' parents have faith? The author of the book of Hebrews would say, yes. Well, what is the evidence that they did? You would say, well, there are many stories, but here is one. The preservation of their son's life, the perception of their son's purpose in God's hands, but also they are very risking their own lives to preserve the life of the child. They took a step and trusted God. Yesterday, I did say, biblical faith lived out faithfully many a time does affect family. But the emphasis in this text, that biblical faith, even in the parents, is also expressed in their relationship to their children. They preserved, they protected, they understood him. They probably nurtured while he was being schooled in the Jewish schools. They did at home their homework. Their faith was demonstrated not only in the temple, not only in the streets, in their home. Can your children really testify that you are a mother of faith and a father of faith? If we are to call all the Sunday school children like we do, I'm not preaching on Sunday, would have done that. Those whose parents have faith, raise your hands. They will probably be thinking, do they have? What are you doing now, stretching my hands? So where are your parents? They are somewhere. Let me put it this way. If they are assessing and affirming that your faith is demonstrated in your calling family devotions, would you pass? If their testing of your faith was the regularity of your attending the Lord's Day services, would you pass? If their test was how you attend Bible studies, would you pass? If their test was the availability for the means of grace prayer meetings, would you pass? Well, if we were you seasoned, we are to check your consistency and faithfulness in giving your offerings, would you pass? In giving your tithes, would you pass? In your being involved on various platforms of ministries, would you pass? In your responding to the needs of the vulnerable, would you pass? In reaching out to the lost, would you pass? And it's your children making that assessment. If we asked Moses, did your parents have faith? His answer would be, yes, they did. And I am proof. If it was not for them, I would be dead. Is that you to your children? It is. Sometimes I say to myself, maybe it's me who has a problem. Why is it as mothers? You do know, those of you that have gone through the youth ministry, you have stories of how that was absolutely helpful. Why are you depriving your children? Why don't they come for youth ministry? You attended one. For some of you, probably here in this local church. But why all of a sudden it's not important for your children? If that was a measure, would you pass? Well, verse 23 tells us faith in relation to parents. It is demonstrated also in how they live their life. Some parents, the things we allow our children to do, even Christians. I do know this for a fact because I've not heard it here, but I know it has happened like everywhere else. If Mrs. Peary found your daughter in ShopRite and she had a navel out and it is pierced and there is beads tangling and she rebuked your daughter, as a Christian, you will probably be angry. That's the Christian thing. That's what you said when you dedicated your child. No, my chakakula. No, it might be a little late because Proverbs will tell us, train a child when he's still young. Don't spare the rod. But many of us, oh, I tell you, it raises issues. All of a sudden we are reminded, 9 months is long. We know it's long. We have heard. We know what happens when mother, we know the vomiting, we do. But that does not mean you then forego your parental responsibilities of raising them in the fear of God. And for some reason, we just assume they'll become better. How? How they become better if you as the primary instructor are not teaching them? How they become better? This is on a lighter note and it doesn't carry much weight. If culturally we to test how you're raising your daughters by cooking mlembe, would they pass? Some, again, we've seen some of these, they bring fish, and this daughter has no clue. And then the mother is saying, Chimana chamsango shanit. No, we should actually be asking the opposite question. Where were you for your daughter not to know how to cook fish? That sounds funny. It has happened. Fish. Do you understand? Black. Not Moses' parents, particularly in things that matter. Again, I've said and I'll say it here. We are willing to spend colossal amounts of money to send our children to school, even if it's a completely destroyed one. There are no morals. We will pay. But to go to a camp, 250. This is 250 shafula. This is life. If they do not have their minds trained, they will become perverted medical doctors. They will be, we were just reading, it's public domain. Indek by Katapa Airport, suspected with God. And somebody was saying, it's not some uneducated chap. If they were trained to say no to wrong, we would not have that plan. Wasn't it in Wapula? Was it what, Sugar Light or something? What is the name again? Suge Light. Even the police. To work a text. By faith, Moses. when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they understood. And we taught there that there was interest parents took in their child. But also they did not fear to die. They would do their best. Their faith enabled them to preserve the life of their son and kept them from being afraid to disobey Pharaoh's edict that every newborn Hebrew boy was to be thrown into the Nile. All other Hebrew children were thrown into the Nile. They were drowned. They drowned. They died. It is the Nile that saved the life of Moses because the parents. Well, Moses himself. 3 direct by faith statements are ascribed to Moses. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasure of Egypt, for he was looking to a glorious reward. Verse 24, by faith Moses, when he was grown, he refused. Verse 27, by faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. You could at that point ask, we are told the parents were not afraid of the king. Well, Moses was not afraid of the king. Who do you think he learned this from? Parents. And he has he's going to go ahead. By faith, verse 28, he kept the Passover and sprinkled the blood so that the destroyer, the firstborn, might not touch them. Moses' faith was firstly expressed negatively, turning away from the luxurious, princely, but sinful life. Moses' faith was secondly expressed positively, chose to be mistreated with God's people. Moses refused the ultimate chance for status, demonstrating his disdain, his hatred for earthly joy. Look at verse 24. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Loyalty. By faith, Moses, when he was grown, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. Is he normal? Dangote wants to adopt you. He's Muslim. No, I love you. That's the way. Can you become my child? What answer will you give him? No, but you might become a Muslim. No, where is the ink? And you might even begin, no, okay, I'll be in a place of, we'll supply the church with ABC and everything. No, Moses said, no, I won't. And here is what he chooses: to be mistreated. His people in Egypt are slaves. He has seen how they are mistreated. They are making blocks, mortar, and it's worse. And then they tell him, you want to be the son of the princess? And his choice is clear. Do you want pleasures of life? Remember the beautiful flavor of ice cream? You remember that name? Caramel. Moses, do you want that? No. I want chicken. What my people are eating. But there is a nobler reason for this. By faith, Moses, when he was grown, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. If you're holding to what is temporary when there is something permanent, that's not being wise. Moses knows it may look nice now, but this will pass away. There is something abiding. Like we sing, there is an abiding what? City. That's why the focus is. Look at the text, verse 26. He considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. He is waiting for that day when the Lord would say, well done, my faithful servant. You were faithful in what was entrusted to you. Now it's time for your reward. It's like a Lazarus situation, and he's saying to this other person, no, Lazarus' time has come to enjoy. That's what was motivating Moses. Basically, that sin at the end of the day does not pay. This life on earth is short-lived. Moses refused the ultimate chance for status, demonstrating his disdain for earthly glory. Listen to one Jewish historian called Josephus, commenting on this particular behavior in terms of how, whether true or not, dramatized it. Josephus writes, on his daughter's account, in a pleasant way, Pharaoh puts his diadem upon Moses' head. But Moses threw it down to the ground, and in a puerile, that is childish mood, he wreathed it round and trod upon it with his feet. He basically threw it away. I don't want this rubbish. And the author to the Hebrews simply puts it this way, refused. How, what happened, we don't know. This was because he considered the reproach of Christ greater wealth than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. The faith of Moses demonstrated a right value system, and a value system that was lived out, not just known and talked about. He lived out that value system. We do know the Christian values. We do. Well, the question is, does our faith demonstrate our living out these values? I have heard of parents who said to their children before the exam, it's parents. It's Christians. And you're saying to them, where is your value system? In one context, the mother saying to the daughters, I think they were in their late 20s, 5, 27, and said, in other words, just go out and sell yourself. It's not a Christian value system. He chose abuse, disgrace, reproach, which was not only physical suffering, but verbal abuse, disgrace, and mockery as well. And in that sense, you can say Moses was a type of Christ. That's what he suffered. Moses was able to reject the securities of this world because he looked at the reward, demonstrating that those who endure hardship will also receive a reward, and taking his stand on things hoped for and the things unseen. The fact that he looked to the reward suggests the special powers of perception that accompany faith. The use of the imperfect tense is important suggesting that Moses looked continually at the reward, not once, but as a lifestyle, never letting it out of his sight. His abandonment of earthly security and the acceptance of disgrace for the sake of a reward is a model for members of the community of Christ who face the same situation. Are you going through difficulties? Please look to the reward and hold on to Christ. By faith he left Egypt, not being afraid of the anger of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and sprinkled the blood so that the destroyer of the firstborn might not touch them. Moses' faith expressed itself in obedience to God. And as you read the stories pictured were happening in most of these cases once in life. There was no precedence. We are in a better position because we have precedence. When Moses is told, just paint your door red with animals' blood, that's it, you'll be safe. And they did. Those who didn't, they died. His careful carrying out of the divine instruction was evidence of his faith, for he trusted in the divine promise that the firstborn of Israel would be spared when the angel of death brought judgment upon them. In the context of Israel, we are told in the text, verse 29, by faith the people crossed the Red Sea as on dry land, but the Egyptians, when they attempted to do the same, were drowned. Listen to the drama of that story. Exodus 14, 21, 22, very quickly. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. Then the Lord said to Moses, 14, 26, 29, stretch out your hand over the sea. And that's the instruction. In other words, Moses, I know there is an obstacle in front of you. There is an enemy behind. I have put protection. There is a cloud. Nobody will draw closer. There is the sea. No one will come. But you need to proceed. But here is the simple act I would like you to do to demonstrate that you trust me. Just stretch your hand. Stretch it. If Moses had not stretched, would have the sea split? It's a simple act of faith. He is told in another situation, go and talk to the rock. Go and speak to it. In other words, you don't speak, there will be no water. But as human as we are all and angry, he not only speaks, hammers it, and credits himself. God still does. But he has spoken. I want to emphasize this, beloved, that the emphasis of Hebrews 11 is do take a step. Faith acts. Faith is not simply contemplation. The wall of Jericho. And a number of these situations, particularly this one, if you're looking at them, it's almost insanity. God says to them, here is how the wall will come down. Just march around it. How many times? 7. And who's marching? The priests in front. Now, that's not how you go to war. If you put me, Zambia is fighting Congo, Pastor Lama leads the army, what will people think? I think all over Zambia are powerful. You know, Baba people now, wabe tabapwetene mfuti. And they think something will happen. That's what they are doing. But why are they doing this? This is what God has said. And on the last day, sound your trumpets. And when they sound, what happens to the wall? It comes down. Well, but there is then a leading story. While the wall comes down, there is one house that is preserved. Remember whose house? Rahab. Why is she being spared? By faith. The whole plane can crash, your chair be preserved. You trust God. Please remain faithful. Please remain faithful to this great God. But here is something I would like us to pick as well. That while Hebrews 11 is a call to faith, that its structure as well is missional. All along, you only had Jews, prominent. It's the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews. Well, when you get to Rahab, what part of the people group is she coming from according to the Bible? Gentiles. Oh, but notice again that all the people before this were in good standing. They were religious people by and large. Well, how is she described? Prostitute. You know, sometimes you read, sure, Bible, it wants you to know that God is in the business, not only saving the religious, but even those we consider the worst of humanity. But how will they be saved? By faith. She heard what God had done. And when she saw the spies, she says to them, we have heard what your God has done. And I know what his plans are for the Gentile. There were many. And she then makes them to promise. And they took an oath. And they said to her, please do put a sign. When we do come, you will be spared. If you do go out of your house, you will die. One wife was given the same instructions, died, and is the cause of most of the diabetes issues today. Salt. Don't look back. What did she do? It's lack of faith. And as you read these passages, that in what God has commanded them, all of them are humanly doable. No one can come to God and say, what you're asking me to do is an impossibility. No. God has designed that within the means of your salvation and your living your Christian life, he will not ask you to do what is impossible. If he does, it's because he knows he will work through you. And then you read through that last part, and simply this: faith gives power to the weak. Faith gives meaning to our sufferings. Faith gives hope for the future. Please do live by faith. Even if your name is not faith, live by it. Please do live a life of faith. And that begins by trusting the Lord Jesus Christ for your salvation. And if that's how you begin, that's how you live. Please do live that life for his glory. Amen.